You ever see a man lean forward in his chair like he's carrying a secret he's not sure he wants to tell? That's Joe right there, the night he said it. He wasn't cracking jokes. He wasn't pulling up videos to laugh at. He was just sitting there, quiet eyes, heavy hand on that big mic, like he was feeling the weight of every word before he let it out. And he said, Erika Kirk told Charlie's parents something that didn't line up. Now that hit me because Joe's not the type to chase rumors. He listens first. He asks questions. He waits till the noise dies down. Then he goes after the stillness. That's where the truth lives. He said she came by their home a week after everything went down. Said she wanted to clear the air. Said she wanted them to understand. But when she started talking, the story had holes big enough to drive a truck through. She talked about how Charlie had changed, how he'd grown cold and distant, how he'd started shutting her out. But his mama, she just sat there listening, holding a picture frame in her hand, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. And Joe said, when she asked Erika, when was the last time she talked to him? Erika blinked just once and said 2 days before the accident. Now Joe, he knows how to read a face. He said he felt it in the room that moment. The air changed like the truth had packed its bags and slipped out the back door, because he'd already seen messages from Charlie to a friend that same night in another city, far away, proof he wasn't with her. Proof her story didn't fit. And that's when Joe's gut started talking louder than his mind. He said, I've heard a lot of stories on this show, but this one right here, this one don't smell right. He told it slow, like he was dragging every word through the mud of disbelief. Said after that meeting, Charlie's parents went quiet. They didn't fight. They didn't accuse. They just thanked her politely and watched her walk out the door. Then his dad looked at his mom and said, she's hiding something, isn't she? And she just nodded, tears in her eyes, because sometimes silence says more than shouting ever could. Joe started tracing the pieces like a hunter tracks prints in the dust. He found calls Erika made right after she left the house. Not to a friend, not to family, but to someone listed as counsel. Now Joe doesn't jump to conclusions. He just lays the pieces on the table and says, look at this. Tell me what you see. And what I saw was a woman building walls before the storm even hit. He talked about Charlie's last few weeks, how that boy was still reaching out, checking on his folks, talking about future plans, about faith, about rebuilding things he'd broken. Doesn't sound like a man who'd given up. Doesn't sound like a man ready to vanish. Sounds like someone still fighting to stand tall. And Joe said when a story like that gets twisted when someone tries to repaint a man's truth, you better believe it cuts deeper than any rumor. Now, he wasn't doing this to hurt nobody. Joe said more than once he wasn't here to dig graves. He was here to shine light. And sometimes that light burns a little bright for the folks standing too close. He mentioned a file Charlie might have left behind, something sealed, something private said. If it ever got opened, it might change the way people remember what happened, but he didn't chase it further. He just said the truth has a funny way of finding daylight all on its own, and that's where it gets real heavy because Joe looked straight into that camera of his and said, if you ever loved somebody and they're gone, the least you can do is keep their truth clean. Don't twist it, don't polish it. Just tell it plain because lies might comfort you for a minute, but they poison the well over time. He said Charlie's folks, they're quiet now living out somewhere far from the noise. But the hurt hasn't left. It just learned how to sit still. They pray for peace, they pray for her too. Yeah, even her, because that's what good people do. They forgive even when they don't understand. And Joe said that kind of grace is rarer than truth these days. He closed that segment with a breath deep and slow. Said sometimes the truth whispers. You just gotta shut up long enough to hear it, and he left it at that. That's the first stretch of the road right there, the setup, the tension, the questions still hanging in the air. In part two, we'll follow Joe as he digs deeper into Erika's motives, the friends who start to speak up, and the moment the parents finally decide they need to know what really happened now. Joe couldn't shake it. He said the words kept circling in his head. Even after the lights in the studio went dark, he tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Charlie's parents sitting at that kitchen table, their hands folded tight over the truth they didn't ask for. So he went back to the tapes, went back to the notes, to the little breadcrumbs he'd tucked away in a folder marked Kirk, and he said there were messages between Erika and one of Charlie's old friends, the kind that start polite, then get tense, and somewhere in those lines was the sound of somebody trying to rewrite a story that already had its ending. He told it like this. He said she'd asked that friend to delete some old photos, said she didn't want the public to twist them. But Joe said the timestamps didn't lie. Those pictures were from nights that mattered to Charlie, moments that showed who he was, unfiltered, raw, alive. Erasing them would be erasing him, and that's when Joe realized she wasn't just protecting herself, she was editing history, and that chilled him. He called up a few folks who'd known them both, people who'd seen them on the road, at conferences, at dinners. They all said the same thing. Charlie adored her, but there were cracks. Little things like missed calls and half-truths. The kind of fractures you only notice when the light hits just right. And Joe said maybe that's what drove him. Maybe that's what broke him, trying to love someone who was building fences instead of bridges. He talked to a producer friend off mic one night over whiskey. The guy asked him why chase it. Joe, why dig into ghosts? And Joe said because silence makes cowards of us all, and I'm too old to be scared of what people think. He said this isn't about clicks, this is about conscience. That next week, Joe dropped another episode, quiet title, no promo. He just pressed record and said, I've got more to say about Erika Kirk. He laid it out slow. He said, a new witness had come forward, a woman who worked with her, who'd been in the room when some of those calls were made. The woman said Erika wasn't crying. She was calculating writing notes, rewriting lines like she was rehearsing for something bigger. And Joe said when he heard that he felt sick, because grief shouldn't need a script. He told the audience how Charlie's parents had sent him a letter. A handwritten one said they didn't know what to believe anymore, but they wanted peace. They said they weren't angry, just tired. And Joe said that letter humbled him, because while the internet was buzzing and spinning stories, those two were sitting in their living room, still praying for clarity, still praying for the woman who might have hurt them the most. That right there, that's the kind of quiet strength this world forgets to honor. He said a friend once told him, truth's like a campfire, it don't spread fast, but if you keep feeding it, it'll keep you warm long enough to make it through the night. So Joe kept feeding it. He reached out again to Erika's circle, and that's when a small thing happened. A private text leaked. One she sent to a publicist said, tell them I was there. Tell them we made peace. And Joe said right then he knew she was still writing her own version of the story. He didn't call her evil, didn't call her cruel. He just said maybe she's lost. Maybe guilt has a way of twisting love until you can't tell them apart anymore. He said, sometimes people lie not to deceive others, but to survive themselves. And that hit me because that's a hard truth to swallow. He described a day when Charlie's dad came on the podcast, not for cameras, just to talk. They sat off air for hours. Two men who'd both lost friends in different ways, and Joe said the man didn't blame her. He just wanted the truth for his son's memory. And Joe looked at him and said, we'll get there one way or another. There was another layer to this story, though something about a message left on Charlie's old phone. one no one had heard until recently. A short voicemail his mom found months later. Joe said the message was calm, steady Charlie thanking someone for forgiveness, and Joe said it didn't sound like he was talking to Erika. It sounded like he was talking to his folks. And that little piece of peace right there, that was the beginning of their healing. Joe told his listeners the internet might never know the full story, but maybe that's all right. Maybe not every answer is meant for public ears. He said sometimes you just gotta trust that the universe will sort out the lies in its own sweet time. He leaned forward at the end of that recording and said, "Folks, I don't hate Erika. I just hate what secrets do to people. They rot the heart, and they make good souls doubt themselves. I think Charlie loved her still. But love don't always mean trust. Sometimes love means letting Gothan." He looked straight at the lens, that slow, soft McClellan drawl of his deepened, and he said, "If you've ever lost someone, don't chase revenge. Chase understanding, because that's the only road that leads you home." And right there he paused, the air hung still. The crew didn't move. He said, "Maybe one day Erika will tell the full truth. Maybe she already has to herself. Maybe that's enough, but if you ever hear my voice, remember this truth's a living thing and lies. They get tired, eventually they fall apart." He smiled, just a little, said, "We're not done yet. There's more to uncover. There's one more story Charlie's parents shared before they closed their doors for good, and he promised to tell it next. Subscribe for more exciting videos.